Welcome to the Candid Podcast, your go-to spot for all things health and wellness and a no-nonsense take on the industry. I'm your host, Tyler Cuthbertson. In a world full of conflicting advice and hidden agendas, we're here to cut through the noise and provide unbiased information and debates for you. This podcast is about pulling back the curtains and giving unfiltered, raw information about health and wellness. We're here to share data without the need to satisfy shareholders or filter out info for profit. We also offer communion and debates with any viewer with opposing ideals, so DM us for a chance to be a guest in the future. Today's episode is about configuring the optimal training protocol. We discuss how to train for any goal for best results. Goals could be to get stronger, lose weight, be more athletic, or anything else. Make sure to check out our media pages at Candid Media Podcasts on YouTube and at The Real Candid Podcast on Instagram. Now enjoy the show. So I want to start this episode by saying that your goals are the number one determining factor for what you should be doing. That might be common sense to most people, but I get asked frequently questions like, what is the best chest exercise? What is the best leg exercise? How can I lose weight? Those questions are quite vague because there's so many factors that do play into that, and I'll explain why. So let's go with that first one. What is the best chest exercise? You may think that's a pretty good question, right? But it depends very heavily on what your specific goals are. Say you want to have a very big bench max, right? That exercise would be completely different than the exercise I'd recommend for someone who just wants a jacked chest. If you want to let's say you want to get a massive bench max, you want to be training at around 5 reps. 5 reps aren't really going to get you jacked. If you want to get a jacked big chest, then I'd recommend something like 12 reps, something like that. And with losing weight, it depends on a bunch of other stuff, like what you were eating previously, how often you've been exercising, have you exercised before, stuff like that. So I just want to highlight that in this episode, I'm going to be discussing very specific goals, and there are other factors that do play into it. This is really just a template video of, say your goal is to lose weight. I will give a general template that you should follow, but depending on your current situation, you should adjust it. So first goal I'd like to discuss is probably the most common one, and that would be to lose weight, right? So as I said earlier, it depends on what you were eating previously. Have you exercised before? Things like that. Do you have any injuries? Obviously, I think that's a little bit of a side note there. But so say your goal is to lose weight. The things I'd recommend most are compound weightlifting and fasting. Compound weightlifting is doing weightlifting, but with the more compound movements, that being squat, deadlift, rows, and bench press, because those target as many muscles as possible, and they give you the best bang for your buck worth of effort, right? Let's say your goal is to lose weight and you're doing something like bicep curls. Those have a very small effect on your body. That's why it's not a good bang for your buck, and it's certainly not a compound movement. So what I recommend for someone who wants to lose weight is something like compound movements, again, rows, back squats, stuff like that, and fasting. And I consider fasting a form of cardiovascular exercise because it has the same benefits, that being lowering your resting heart rate, increasing heart rate variability, and all that good stuff. So fasting is also a massive fat burner. If you know me, I'm a massive proponent of fasting. I fast very often. Sometimes I'll do a 2-day fast. I had a 2-day fast actually like 3 days ago, and it takes away fat within no time, right? If your goal is to lose weight as soon as possible, I'm not saying just drastically decrease the amount of food you consume. I'd say maintain that same amount or eat a little bit less, but also include fasting, because fasting is, as I explained many times, it picks and chooses the cells to burn, and that's usually fat at first. So it's going to burn all the fat away super fast, and then what's left is less fat percentage and more muscle mass. So there you go. So we're going to go into a specific training protocol. Say your goal was to lose weight again. So compound movements, again, would be back squat, rows, stuff like that. So say Monday you do a leg day, and that would include the big compound movements. So you do back squat, then you maybe have lunges, and then maybe leg press, things like that. They target all areas of the legs and get it best bang for your buck. So yeah, it would be kind of a split. If you've been in the weightlifting space a long time, you know that word very well. So your split would be something like Monday you do legs, Tuesday you do chest, Wednesday you do back, and then you rest one day, then maybe do legs again, chest again, rest, pull, something, back day, something like that. So I can go into like examples of what you should do, but it's up to you to configure that because everyone's schedule is different, and I don't want to give anyone the wrong template for their goals. So generally you want to have designated days for each body part. I'd say, again, Monday for legs, Tuesday for chest, stuff like that. Include those massive compound movements. Say, I'll include some particular workouts like I did for legs, because there's back squat, there's lunges, there's hack squat, there's leg press. For chest, it would be bench press, then dumbbell press, then maybe dumbbell flies, then maybe cable press, stuff like that. Then for a back day would of course be deadlift, then it'd be rows. Generally, if your goal is to lose weight, you would want a rep range of about, say, 12, maybe even up to 15, because that's really where for deadlift it's different. You don't want to go to like 15 reps on deadlift. I think that's almost pointless. But generally, if your goal is to lose weight, a rep range of around 8 to 12 or even 15 is ideal, because that's when the burning comes the most, and that's when hypertrophy is activated. Like bench press around, you want to start your workouts with the lower rep range, and then throughout the workout you kind of increase it throughout time, but you want to start with the biggest compound movements. So let's say chest day, you start it with bench press, then you go into, let's say, dumbbell press, and bench press was around 8 reps, then you go to dumbbell press after 3 sets of that, and you go to around 12 reps, then you go to cable press, which is around 15 reps, something like that, and you do 3 sets of each of those, and that's when you get the most benefits. And something like a pull day, also known as a back day, would include something like deadlift for, let's say, 8 reps, probably at most, because deadlift you get the biggest bang for your buck for lower reps. And then you could move on to barbell rows for about 8 to 12 reps. And then you move on to, let's say, let's do reverse flies, right? And then that'll be around 15 reps. And then you can even do single arm cable rows for about 15 reps as well. Generally, the workout should look like, again, 3 sets of each of those workouts. So 3 sets of deadlift, 3 sets of rows, 3 sets of cable rows, something like that, or reverse flies, whatever. And then during those, again, it's 8 reps, then to 12, then to 15. That's what you want to do. So now we're going to move on to the topic of fasting. So when it comes to fasting, the one that is most convenient is intermittent fasting. That would be, an example would be every day you wake up and you don't eat until 12 p.m., something like that, because that's obviously more convenient than once a month choosing to not eat for 2 days, because, I'm assuming a lot of you guys are busy, you have work, and you can't just go 2 days without eating, right? So intermittent fasting is definitely most ideal. And say you are in a workplace and it's difficult to kind of do that, what I'd say is wait until your lunch break to start eating, and break your fast with something like fruit or red meat. And everyone here knows I'm a big proponent of both of those, so I wouldn't recommend anything else anyway. What this does is your body has to use something in order to have energy, right? So you can use food to have energy, or your body can pick and choose cells to deteriorate and use as fuel. What it's going to do is eat fat as fuel, and that's why you can lose weight. You can lose so much weight just doing fasting, right? I know people who can eat like complete junk, and all they do is fast consistently, and they look like a bodybuilder. Not big and strong, but they're very, very cut just because they take fasting seriously. So yeah, intermittent fasting is definitely something I recommend. If you're looking to go a little extra, then I would go with the once a month, do a 2 to 3 day fast, something like that. I also know people who maybe once a year do a 5 to 8 day fast, which has massive benefits as well. So yeah, stuff like that. Fasting is definitely something you would want to take advantage of if your goal is to lose weight. Now, some of you are probably thinking, why hasn't he included cardio? And the reason is because cardio essentially is what fasting is, except you participate in losing a lot of weight. Cardio does lose weight very efficiently. It's actually more efficient at losing weight than weightlifting is. But it's not just losing fat, it's also losing muscle. And muscle mass does improve your health in countless ways. So that's why I'm not a big proponent of it. And you can get the same benefits from fasting, as I've said many, many times. So cardio isn't that important. I mean, if you want to excel a bit, you can do some cardio. That's no problem. Just be aware it's a minor sacrifice to your muscle mass sometimes. Now we're going to move on to the topic of strength. So I know a lot of people who participate in powerlifting, or just the goal of increasing their maxes, that being deadlift max, squat max, and bench max. Those are those are the 3 lifts that everyone talks about, right? So say your goal is to increase your max on any of those. So what I'd recommend is something around 3 to 5 reps. And the reason is because whenever you're activating those particular muscle fibers, say in a bench max where you're lifting as much weight as possible for a very short amount of time, that muscle fiber, I believe, is called type type 2X muscle fiber. This muscle fiber is responsible for emitting as much force as possible, but for an extremely short amount of time. Unfortunately, you can't actually get stronger from a 1 rep max. That just doesn't have any benefits to your body. So what I recommend for someone whose goal is to just get as strong as possible in those particular lifts is 3 to 5 reps of, let's say, 3 to 5 sets. So that would include 3 to 5 reps of 3 to 5 sets of bench press, and then you could maybe even do dumbbell press just for the extra stability. And then for deadlift, you do the same thing. It'd be 3 to 5 reps, 3 to 5 sets of deadlift, and then you can also do rows, stuff like that. And what that does is it increases and exercises your fast twitch muscle fibers, that being the one we're talking about, type 2X. And that's the only way you're going to really, that's the most efficient way to improve your max is increase the strength of those particular muscle fibers. So I'm going to explain the 3 different types of muscle fibers. I'm pretty sure there are more than 3, but the way to explain it in a simple way is that there are 3. So let's go with type 2 first. Type 2 muscle fiber is the type of muscle fiber you use if you are running a marathon, for example, right? Marathon runners don't emit a lot of force when they're doing a marathon. They just happen to emit subtle amounts of force, but for an extremely long period of time. That's the muscle fiber that's involved. Type 2 is the muscle fiber involved for long bouts of exercise that don't really emit a lot of force. And then there's type 2A muscle fiber, which is the one that usually athletes would want. That would be like, let's say, a 12 rep kind of exercise where it's pretty heavy force emission, but it's for a longer period of time, right? I like to use the analogy that type 2 muscle fiber is like a full auto pistol. It's small bullets, not super powerful, but it goes fast, and it can, like with Big Mag or something, right? Type 2A would be like an assault rifle, right? It's bigger rounds, lasts a bit, and then type 2X would be like a tank round. It's one big shot that takes a long time to reload. So that's the analogy I like to use. And when it comes to type 2A muscle fiber, the way to exercise that, like I said, would be about 12 reps. And the reason athletes want that is because it's lots of force emission, but you can also do it for a long time, right? Athletes aren't, like, let's say for a football player as an example, they aren't sprinting for 2 seconds or let's say 4 seconds and then being done for the next 30 minutes, right? They're sprinting for 12 minutes, but sprinting is a heavy emission of force, right? It's emitting as much force as possible for a long period of time. That's what type 2A muscle fiber really is. And then we look up type 2X again, which is as much force as possible, but for a very, very short amount of time. For example, a bench max, right? So now you know the different types of muscle fiber. Truthfully, the rep range is really what determines what you look like. So again, when you're training fast twitch muscle fiber, all it's doing is strengthening those current muscle fibers that you do have. That's when you look at power lifters, for example, the people who do 3 to 5 reps often, they kind of look average when it comes to their strength. They don't look particularly big or strong, but they happen to be strong anyway. Whereas bodybuilders are massive. They're usually massive people. They are super jacked, at least the ones that we all know of, like Ronnie Coleman and Arnold Schwarzenegger, stuff like that. And that's because bodybuilding is focused on hypertrophy, which is tearing down each muscle fiber so that the muscle fibers grow back bigger and stronger. So yeah, the rep range is what determines that. And the rep range for bodybuilding is typically, say, 8 to 12 and maybe up to 15 reps, because that's when you start actually tearing and burning those muscle fibers. And when people speak about their rep range, what they're referring to is, you could have the same weight for each one. Sometimes, like, you could have, say you're doing dumbbell press and you can have 30 pounds and go to 15 reps. And you can also do a 1 rep, which would be 30 pounds of 1 rep when that would have no benefit. What we're referring to is if you do a 1 rep, that should be as much weight as you can possibly get on there for 1 rep. And when we say 12 reps, we mean as much weight as you can get on there before you fail at like 12 reps, right? So on that 12th rep when you're doing it, you should be able to barely push it up or not even be able to push it up. And that's what we call training to failure, which I can't say I'm a big proponent of. I used to do it all the time, but now that there's more information coming out, it's not as beneficial as I thought it was. So of course, it depends on your goals. There's benefits to it and there's downsides to it. It's just up to you. So now we're going to talk about bodybuilding and the goal of getting bigger and stronger, which usually pertains to getting more jacked as well. So look up bodybuilder, you're going to see a big, strong guy who's pretty cut. That's the look we're talking about. So if your goal is to become a bodybuilder or look like a bodybuilder, typically you want a rep range of about 8 to 12, sometimes 15. Yeah, you're probably thinking that's a really big rep range, right? Which is true. It depends on what your particular goal within bodybuilding is, right? Inevitably, if your goal is to look like a bodybuilder, you want to look bigger and stronger and be more cut, right? So say your goal is to put on weight, that being muscle mass, I'd recommend a rep range of about 8 to 12. You can push it up a little bit higher if you want. Whereas if your goal is to just look more tone and still pull on muscle, then a rep range of around 12 to 15 is what I'd say is optimal. And that would include, let's say, 3 to 4 sets of those reps, and doing that like 3 to 4 times per workout. One example would be, say Monday you do 3 sets of barbell rows to 8 reps. Then the next exercise would be dumbbell rows to 12 reps. Then the next set would be, like I said earlier, cable flies, single arm cable flies to around 12 to 15 reps. Something like that would be a great example of a bodybuilding based workout. What I was referring to when it comes to losing weight is those compound movements are really your biggest bang for your buck when it comes to your time in the gym, right? Because when you do back squat, you're engaging your glutes, your hamstrings, your quads, and all the muscles in between. Whereas if you're doing quad extensions, you're only engaging the quads, basically. Which that wouldn't be a good bang for your buck if your goal is to lose weight, because the goal is just to burn as much and get the most out of your time. Whereas bodybuilding, it's the goal. The goal is to just get bigger, stronger muscles. So what I recommend for bodybuilders is definitely include those compound movements like back squat, bench press, rows, and stuff like that, and deadlift. But I would also include isolation lifts, and that would be something like lat pull downs or leg extensions or hamstring curls or bicep curls. Those things activate very particular muscles. And that's when, say, with a bicep curl, you're not engaging your tricep, you're not engaging the shoulders that much, you're not engaging the chest or anything. It's just the bicep, and that's what's going to grow the bicep, right? So that's why a lot of bodybuilders have not a pull day, but like a back and biceps day, where they do back particular workouts like lat pull downs, which only engages the back, basically, a little bit of the biceps. And then they have bicep curls and different types of curls, which engage those particular muscles. Yeah, that would be an example of an isolation workout, which is where it only engages that muscle, rather than compound movements, which engage that muscle plus multiple others. So yeah, bodybuilding, you can definitely include isolation workouts. That's what I recommend. So an example of a leg workout, for example, if your goal is to do bodybuilding, would be, say, back squat for 8 reps, then you'd have lunges to 12 reps, and then you'd have, like, let's say Bulgarian split squats to 12 reps, which is ruthless, like freaking painful. And then you'd have, let's say, quad extensions to 12 to 15 reps, and then hamstring curls for about 12 to 15 reps. The last two are isolation workouts because they only engage one body part. So that's a good example. And just because I'm such a nice guy, I'm going to include the diets that would work best for some of these protocols. So say your goal was to put on as much muscle as possible. That would include a calorie surplus, which would mean you're eating more calories than you were previously. That would be like, say you're consuming 2,000 calories a day on average. And then you begin your new bodybuilding split where you're trying to put on muscle. Say you add like 300 calories to it. So you're at 2,300 calories per day, something like that. And what I recommend is a lot more carbs, because carbs are really, so I do animal based, but I also happen to incorporate white rice. And the reason for that is because there isn't usually enough carbs within just animal based. I'm consuming fruit and honey. Those are my only carbs usually, if I wasn't including white rice. And usually that amount of carbs wouldn't be sufficient to put on the muscle mass that I'm trying to obtain. So the reason I include white rice is because that is definitely something that helps out with building muscle mass and often athletic performance, because it's so rich in the carbohydrate. It's the complex carb that you want. So for bodybuilders, I definitely wouldn't recommend a lot of white rice. I'd say we can go 2 cups a day, maybe even 3 if you're really taking it serious. It definitely depends on the amount of calories you consume. So I'm, again, like I said earlier, adjust this information accordingly depending on your goals and your situation. So yeah, bodybuilders consume a lot of carbs, of course, a lot of protein, and you want a lot of fat too. The one you probably want the highest though is carbs. And then something like losing weight, of course, I recommend animal based again, because, it's really the best bang for your buck. I've explained a billion times why it's the best. Again. I'll probably have a separate episode just on the animal-based diet because it's so good. It's the part of this podcast, part of the purpose of this podcast was really just to shine light on that diet because it's really not getting enough attention, and it definitely deserves that. There's more people talking about carnivore, which carnivore is great. I've heard very good things about it. I personally haven't tried it because if you don't know already, being under the age of 20, just generally being in your youth and only consuming one food is actually pretty detrimental to your development. So, which is why I include animal-based, which is meat and fruit. So I'm not just consuming meat or just consuming vegetables/fruit like a vegetarian. But yeah, so if your goal is to lose weight, animal-based, probably a calorie. Sometimes I'd recommend a calorie surplus even if you are weightlifting. But generally, if your goal is to lose weight, calorie deficit is optimal. Or you can maintain the same calories and just do weightlifting or calorie surplus, very small calorie surplus with, where you incorporate weightlifting as well, so that all like those extra calories are being used to put on more muscle, and muscle mass increases your metabolism, and then also just happens to burn more fat. So there you go. And just a little side note I like to highlight is when people, and I've said this multiple times, but it's just something I like to highlight because it's very important and I hear too much of it, that you can find benefits to anything you really look into. There are benefits to eating hot Cheetos. There are some nutrients in those, right? Which is why when I hear someone say, oh, well, the benefits are XYZ, of course, benefits are a good factor to talk about when it comes to diets and other protocols, but something like a vegetarian diet, when you say the benefits are XYZ, you're still trying to justify eating foods that have borderline zero bioavailable nutrients, or at least compared to red meat. So with something like that, I wouldn't go not protesting, but advocating for it, and your argument being the benefits of it, because there's obviously a whole lot more benefits to an animal-based diet rather than something where you're just having alkalized vegetables and fruits. So, so just again, don't follow something just because of the benefits. Look at the downsides. Look at the people who are doing it. Look at their results. And look at the community, I'd say, because when you look at the vegetarian community, there's a lot of good stuff in there. I'm not going to lie. But generally, it's filled with a lot of the longevity space. And from what I've seen, and also I know from a lot of other people, only consuming vegetables is just, it really is detrimental in many ways. So yeah, just a little side note there. Now we're going to talk about rest days. So throughout the past, let's say 50 years, the rest and recovery has been researched and, let's say, developed as far as its education a lot better, because when you look at like the bodybuilding days, like let's say the golden era with Arnold Schwarzenegger and Ronnie Coleman, stuff like that, they were training in the gym for like 4 hours a day, which now we know is you're receiving very minimal benefit, or actually degrading the muscle mass you could be getting by spending that much time in there. So when it comes to rest and recovery, I take it very seriously. So what I recommend for, say your goal is, let's go with this. Inevitably, I'd say basically everybody needs at least 2 days of rest a week, assuming you're engaging in weightlifting, which I recommend for basically everybody. So your goal is to lose weight. 2 days a week is probably the minimum, and for bodybuilding, it's about the same. What I noticed, at least for myself, is, and as well as many of my peers who do the same stuff, when you have more than 5 days a week of weightlifting, I notice I get overstrained, and some days I wake up and I feel like I was hit by a train. Not in the good way, like I explained on my supplements episode. Definitely not in the good way, but and sometimes I'll find myself having random aches and pains just because I'm putting my body through too much stuff. So I'd say 5 days a week is good. You want to split those 2 rest days on like throughout the week. You don't want to have them both back to back because you're not going to receive the maximum benefit. So I'd say Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday working out, and then let's go Thursdays a rest. Then you have Friday, Saturday working out, and then Sundays a rest. So something like that. Or you can even go 4 days a week. I actually find that 4 days a week is the one where I see the most results. But that is just me. I know some people who can actually function working out 7 days a week, which I don't recommend to almost anybody. But definitely explore that. Just don't come back here saying you injured yourself and try to sue me. So yeah, I don't recommend doing that. I say 4 to 5 times a week is optimal. Of course, it depends on your activity level, what you are doing, particularly say your goal is to become an exceptional martial artist. 4 days a week, maybe 5 days a week is definitely ideal. You definitely don't want to push yourself too far when it comes to martial arts. I know, for example, in Muay Thai, you're getting leg kicks like crazy, right? You don't want to have a leg day after getting the crap kicked out of your leg, because that's probably not going to work out too well. You don't want even more inflammation in that area. So, yeah, determine, you want to adjust these things accordingly, just depending on your goals and your current situation. So, yeah, generally I recommend 2 days of rest at least. And then on top of that, make sure on your rest days you want to fast a pretty decent amount on the rest days, particularly. When your goal is to put on muscle, fasting isn't really a big priority. I inevitably think every human on earth should fast no matter your goals, but so that's when the rest days, I would usually take advantage of that. Say rest day, you don't eat until 2 p.m. and then you break it with some fruit, and then you have some red meat after that, something like that. And then the thing about rest days, and something that people don't take advantage of enough, is let's start with this. Your central nervous system is responsible for regulating stress, your adrenals and stuff like that. Whenever you work out, you're not just working out your muscles, you're working out the nervous system in your body responsible for. It's a hard thing to explain. So when you're engaging in heavy exercise, your body has to adjust itself, and through that stress, it has to regulate itself again. If you're putting yourself through intense stress every single day, your central nervous system becomes exhausted, and that causes a lot of issues. So that's one of the things about rest days that people don't talk about enough, is half of the reason you have a rest day is not just for your body, it's for your central nervous system. Your central nervous system can't take an hour of strain every single day where you're weightlifting. It's too overloading, and that causes a lot of problems. It doesn't cause, I hear people use the term adrenal fatigue, which doesn't exist, by the way, so don't use that term. But it's bad for your stress levels, cortisol particularly, which is stress, if you understand that. But the way you regulate your central nervous system on your rest days would be probably try to stay away from your phone, the news. Don't do things that are stressful. Don't watch movies, or at least movies that have a intense plot, which is basically every movie. I don't know anyone who watches a movie that there's no bad scene or anything, right? But basically, you want to avoid much stimulation so that your nervous system can kind of have a flat line, and that can have time to recover. So what I recommend is try to meditate a lot, and you also want active recovery. So what I would recommend is go for a run, maybe like a 2-mile run that day, or go for a lot of walks after every single meal. You should do this anyway, though. After every meal, you should take a walk for maybe 7 to 10 minutes. And then, so the way you rest your nervous system is get some active recovery. Don't stimulate yourself too much. Just relax. Don't watch the news, because that's extra stress. Generally, you want to stay away from stress and things that really peak your energy levels. That's really how you do it. And then again, when it comes to active recovery, you want subtle things that. So the reason I recommend running, like jogging on a rest day, which people find a little weird that you would want to do something like that on a rest day. The reason is when you're running, your body, or any form of cardiovascular exercise, your body has to. So say you did a lot of weightlifting this week and you're pretty sore. There's a lot of acid and kind of toxicity within the muscle, just kind of like lactic acid and stuff like that kind of builds up over time. And if you're not actively moving around, that acid will just build up more and more. And a lot of people who like old school bodybuilders, for example, they're very big on just working out, eating a ton of food, and other than that, not moving at all, right? And I'm not putting a shame on the golden age of bodybuilding. Those are some of the best bodybuilders of all time, but excuse my congestion. But active recovery is extremely important. So when you sit down and you let that acid recover, you become more sore the next day often. The thing is, like, for example, I think last week, and people who take active recovery seriously will say the same thing. My legs were extremely sore a few days ago, and I walked a ton that day because I do door-to-door selling, so I'm walking for like 7 hours a day. The next day, my legs were hardly sore at all, and it's just because I get that very subtle stimulation where it's just it's movement, and like, kind of thinking about like this. You do a lot of weightlifting, right? That area is sore. You leave the acid there because you haven't stimulated the area. It's not going to, the acid from, like the lactic acid buildup isn't going to go anywhere if you haven't actually stimulated or done anything to that area, right? Change doesn't come from nothing. So when, let's say my legs are sore and there's a lot of lactic acid buildup and toxicity, stuff like that, and I begin to walk for hours and hours, there's movement and circulation going through my body and my muscles, which causes the acid to have to move out, which is one of the reasons I'm such a big proponent of running on rest days, because that's like, taking a long walk, but it's faster and supplies a lot more oxygen to the body. So yeah, that's definitely something important. Take a 2-mile run, do a lot of walking on your rest days. Generally just have low stimulation. That's how you do it. So next topic is going to be how do you train for longevity? So that's something people don't talk about enough, and I think it's something people really need to hear about. The only time I've ever heard of someone actually training for longevity, as in working out for longevity, is this guy I saw on YouTube Shorts. Actually, I've referred to him previously. He's the guy who consumes 50 pills a day just to make up for his lack of nutrients and all that. But anyway, he has particular workouts that are good for longevity. And by the way, I do like this guy. I like that he's pursuing something that the world really definitely needs to hear, which is making his body primed to live as long as humanly possible. That's something that humans really need to see, because we don't see that enough right now. And he's kind of like a human experiment. I mean, it's really interesting when you look at it. I just don't agree with some of the things he does. Anyway, the thing about trying to train for longevity is you got to resort back to the caveman stuff, right? So what did cavemen do? They climbed trees, they sprinted a lot, maybe they jumped a bit, they fought animals, stuff like that, right? Safe to say they weren't doing back squat, safe to say they weren't doing bench press, they weren't doing power cleans, they weren't doing any of that stuff. When they were doing sprinting, for example, I'm actually a massive proponent of sprinting. I don't do them myself, which is a little hypocritical, but I'm also not training for longevity. I'm only 17, so I got room. I got time. But anyway, the thing with sprinting is you're engaging so many muscles. And when I talk about compound movements, that refers to all of the big muscles around, right? So when I say deadlift, for example, it's engaging the hamstrings, it engages the quads a little bit, engages the glutes, engages the back, right? So that it engages all those big muscles. But when I refer to sprints as in that it engages all sorts of muscles, is that it engages all those big muscles, but also all the like thousands of other intricate muscles in between, which like don't even have a name, at least to the average person, right? So the reason you see some like powerlifters, for example, get injuries often, at least a couple years in, is because those intricate muscles aren't being exercised. What they do is like a powerlifter, or at least someone like with a bad coach who doesn't quite understand this, which most people don't. The average powerlifter trains, 3 to 5 reps of bench press, maybe even dumbbell press and stuff like that. And then that's kind of all they do, right? Whereas a really well-trained professional or even an Olympic level person, they will do those things, right? Because those are super important. But there's also those thousands of intricate muscles that are in between and all around the chest that aren't being exercised. So what you're doing, and the reason these people get injured so often, or maybe not so often, but we do see it, is because they're able to overload the muscles that haven't been worked out with the muscle that has so much strength that the other muscles can't even handle it, right? So if you're doing bench press, right, and the only muscle that's strong on that frontal area is your chest, and all those other intricate muscles aren't strong enough, you're putting too much load on those other muscles, and eventually they wear out and they get pulled, or they what's the word? Tear, stuff like that. Or they just get a little too strained, right? I mean, you can't say your chest muscles, like, the big chest muscle I'm referring to, can handle 300 pounds of pressure. You can bench press 315 pounds. Those other muscles may not be able to carry that load. It's just that you've been able to get that far before those muscles are like, wait, we can't do this. We're going to have to give out. And that's why that happens. The way you prevent something like that from happening, you probably guessed it already, is just exercise those muscles. And you're probably wondering, how do I do that? One guy I'd go to learn more about this is definitely, I can't believe I'm alive during this generation where this guy's giving this information, because it's unbelievable. His name is Knees Over Toes Guy. I might have referred to him previously, but he's uncovering crazy information on longevity and how to be able to exercise for longer in life, and how to train for longevity. That's what I'm discussing. So if you're interested in this topic, absolutely check him out. He's on YouTube, and he has like revolutionary, life-changing information on how to live longer, how to prevent yourself from injury, how to be more active when you're older. I mean, if you were to follow his protocol, let's say from age 20 to 70 or something, you would be able to do back handsprings with that time you're 70. I'm fully confident in that. As crazy as that sounds, the stuff he talks about is absolutely incredible. So yeah, go check him out. Basically, what he talks about is how to work out those very intricate muscles so that you don't injure yourself and your body is strong all around. Another example of the way people get injured is you can get someone who's very big and strong, like a bodybuilder, a power lifter, something like that, and you put them in a jujitsu mat, and they get injured lightning fast. That's happened to me. That's happened to many of my colleagues who also do jujitsu and were weightlifting beforehand. It's because, again, all those big, like, well-known muscles and important muscles like the back, the shoulders, the chest, the legs, all that stuff are well developed. But there's all those other little muscles that are too weak to handle it. And again, let's say you're doing back squat, right? That's one movement, and it's a very specific movement, right? Whereas in jiu-jitsu, sometimes you're in a squat position, but you're also pushing and moving around in positions that your body isn't used to. And your legs can handle all that pressure, but those other muscles they're not ready for that. And then that's when injury comes and you fall on the floor and you can't roll anymore. So stuff like that. So definitely check out Knees Over Toes guy. He tells you exactly how to do that. He has a lot of longevity protocols. Some of them being like rotator cuff workouts, which I can't really describe in words, or at least reasonably. I'm not super good at trying to portray images with my words sometimes, but it would be something like that. Or there's something called the ATG split squat, which he's a massive proponent of, which is where it's like knees over your toes when you're doing a lunge, but your knee is as far over your toes as you can possibly get it. And that's stretching the tendons. It's getting all those little muscles around your knees developed. Your groin is getting stronger. And you can see how a back squat is actually so much different than an ATG split squat, because if you're doing back squat properly, your knee should be at least on like near toe level or past your toes. But with ATG split squat, you're engaging the groin a lot. You're engaging the little muscles around the knees. You're engaging the calves a lot, and all the little 1,000 muscles in between that. So yeah, the way you train for longevity is what's called bulletproofing, right? That's kind of what I'm referring to this whole time. The term that a lot of people use is bulletproofing. That being just having very resilient muscles, and that you don't get injured and all your muscles are developed in proportion to the others, right? You don't want a super developed chest, yet the little muscles in between that are too weak and can't take much load. So yeah, I can't really describe it well. What I'm recommending is just go check Knees Over Toes guy out. He'll tell you how to do all that stuff. So you want to train for longevity, follow his protocols. That's really all I can say. He's an expert in that field. And just because I don't want anyone to be confused, you probably guessed already, the right diet for living as long as possible and training for longevity would be animal-based. I wouldn't include much carbs. You don't really want any white rice if your goal is to be living as long as possible. That's really just for athletic performance and getting bigger and stronger, right? So yeah, just animal-based meat and fruit. That's what I recommend. Next topic is going to be how to train to be as athletic as possible. Now, this topic is going to be a little complicated in that most people who train for athleticism already have a coach that's telling them exactly what to do. Now, whether they know what they're doing is up to them, and it's up to you to figure that out. That's why I'd follow someone like Knees Over Toes guy or JC Santana or The Bioneer on YouTube. They know a whole lot about that area, about athleticism, functional training, stuff like that. So yeah, generally I'm going to talk about the person who wants to be athletic and doesn't have a particular sport. And maybe you do have a particular sport, and which is totally fine. But say you're at home, you want to lose weight, you want to get fit, something like that. But you also want to be athletic. You want to be able to jump high, run fast, lift things, stuff like that. So I'm going to give some like bang for your buck athleticism things, right? But it does depend on your goals. So say being able to run fast and jump high is appealing to you. I'd recommend something like plyometrics, as well as some type 2A muscle fibers, which would be like let's say kettlebell swings for about 8 reps or less, stuff like that. Sprinting, of course, sprinting is super fundamental. If your goal is to be athletic, pretty much 100% of the time, sprinting is the one you want to go for. But something like plyometrics is basically just bodyweight training, except it's all about movement. So, for example, plyometrics would be box jumps, where you have a box that's, say, it's 3 feet high, and you jump up to that box, and that's plyometrics. And then you drop back down, and the second you hit the ground, you shoot back up. That would be something like plyometrics. It increases that explosiveness, builds tendon strength, and it'll be functional training as well, because let's say your goal is to jump high. Plyometrics is definitely ideal because you're literally training to jump high, therefore it's functional. So there you go. Now, to give a general template on people who want to be athletic from home, or even if you have a gym, something like that. Let's say your goal is to be, let's say you're a boxer, right? And of course, when you're boxing, you throw hooks. And if you're a boxer, you understand it's not just your arm moving, it's your whole body, and you have to twist, right? So what I'm going with this is, in order to configure a proper training regimen for someone with a very particular athletic goal, you want to look at the particular muscles that are used for the movements in that sport, right? So for a boxer, you have very subtle leg movements, but it's all explosive from a very subtle depth. Like, you're not squatting down in boxing, or at least I hope not. That probably wouldn't work out too well for you. So what I mean is, whenever you're boxing, your legs are slightly bent, and in that position is where you want the explosiveness. So, and it applies the same with rotational strength. So if you're in boxing, you happen to rotate when you throw a hook. If your goal is to train for, boxing, for example, and you want to be more athletic in that position, you want to train the particular muscles that are engaged with those movements. So say when you're throwing a hook, it engages rotation. You want to increase your rotational strength. One way you do that is get a medicine ball, say 8 to 15 pounds, 15 pounds on the heavier end. And you want to rotate it as hard as you can and throw it against a wall. Something like that would increase your rotational strength and increase the hook power, right? And then when it comes to your legs in boxing, for example, your legs are barely bent, so you want to increase your explosiveness from that position. So what I'd recommend is do something like a squat jump or a back squat where your legs are just barely bent, and from that barely bent position, explode up as hard as you can, which is going to build that explosiveness from that particular position. I saw a professional boxer, Ryan Garcia. You might have heard of him. I saw on one of his training videos, he had his coaches making him do a back squat. He had like maybe 45s, 25s on each side, something like that. It doesn't really matter. And then he had some resistance band tied to it where he would have to just barely squat down, like just barely, and then from that position explode up as hard as he could, because that's just building that power and explosiveness from that position. The theme here is, with whatever sport you're choosing to do, find the particular muscles that are being used and the particular muscle fibers and exercise those things. Another good example would be, say your goal is to jump as far as possible, which I think is a particular sport. It's something in track. I can't remember the exact name of it. But in that position where your goal is to jump as far as possible, if you know the proper technique, it's where you get a little bit of knees over toes action. And with that, that's when all the fast twitch muscle fiber is generated. So whenever you're in that position, you kind of lean forward and then you jump as hard as you can. That would be fast twitch muscle fiber. So what you want to do is find whatever muscle is used to jump in that position, and then work out whichever muscle fiber is used to jump with that amount of power. So in that position, it's fast twitch muscle fiber, and the particular muscles used to jump in that position would be the front of your quads, also known as the teardrop part of your quads. How do you exercise those muscles? Where you do something like ATG split squat, which primarily engages that quad, and then you want to exercise it in a way that engages the fast twitch muscle fibers. That would be something like ATG split squat for, let's say, 8 reps, or maybe even a little bit less than that. What that's going to do is make those muscles that you want to exercise faster and stronger, so you're going to be able to jump farther. That's the goal, is to find whichever muscles are used for that particular movement and strengthen them accordingly. And then on to the next goal, which would be testosterone optimization, right? So a lot of people, particularly men in their 30s and 40s, like to train for testosterone because you don't have a whole lot of that after the age of 30. Not for everybody, of course. Some people have a lot of testosterone, some people don't. Generally, after the age of 30, your testosterone tends to decrease every year. So what people like to do for testosterone, or at least the optimal training regimen for someone who wants to increase testosterone as much as possible, is known as the 3 to 5 rule. That would be 3 to 5 reps of 3 to 5 sets, 3 to 5 times a week, and 3 to 5 minutes of rest time per set. right? So that would be, and you want to include compound movements, right? You're not going to get much testosterone benefits from bicep curls. So it would be the compound movements I listed earlier, which would be deadlift, back squat, rows, bench press, things like that. So it'd be something like, deadlift for 5 reps, then you rest maybe 3 to 5 minutes. Or, let's go with this. Deadlift 3 to 5 reps, then you would have 3 to 5 sets of that. In between each set, you would have 3 to 5 minutes of rest time, and you'd have this workout 3 to 5 times a week. That's the rule for testosterone optimization. Generally, that's what boosts testosterone the most, is that fast twitch muscle fiber for a shorter amount of time. I'm going to give an example of a good testosterone optimized workout. That would be, for let's say a pull day, for example. This would be deadlift for 35 reps, and that would be 3 to 5 sets of that. Then after that, you'd have 3 to 5 reps and sets of, let's say, dumbbell rows or even barbell rows, something like that. And then after that, you can do maybe even reverse flies if you want to put on some muscle, but you don't have to include that. It's really just about compound movements for fast twitch muscle fiber and not a whole lot of strain, because when you strain your body at a heavy level, generally it can also decrease testosterone. So when you look at someone who does, let's say, Muay Thai, which is a lot of cardio, some fast twitch muscle fiber, but it's not the one that's used for testosterone, generally the testosterone level in them is much lower than someone who engages in heavy compound lifts. One of the reasons being is that when you're training Muay Thai, you're training all the time and for long bouts, which is definitely not optimal for testosterone. And when you have minimal strain, but lots of heavy lifting, creates an adaptation in your body where it needs to increase your strength. Therefore, testosterone has to come into play. Now, before I end the episode, I want to answer a question that's probably pretty common that maybe some of you have asked already, and it's how do I include multiple of these modalities within my training regimen? So that's a really, really good question, and I like to train in a way which I call jack of all trades training. I actually didn't make that name. It's a guy named The Pioneer. I named him earlier. You should definitely go check him out if you find what I say interesting. He has a lot of stuff to uncover. I'd say actually a pretty large percentage of the information I've learned is from him. I've been a loyal follower for a long time. Anyway, the way you'd incorporate a lot of these things is to figure out which ones complement the other ones best, right? And maybe some of them don't complement each other at all, and that's why you want to separate them. So say you have, let's say you do bodybuilding and martial arts at the same time, which can be pretty difficult. You want to separate them in days, right? You don't want to have in the morning you have bodybuilding, and then at night you have Muay Thai. That's a little bit too much force emission and energy being depleted in one day. So what I recommend is, say Monday you do let's say a chest day, right? And then the next day you have Muay Thai, then the next day is a rest, then the next day is legs. I don't know, something like that. But you don't want to have the two in the same day. And then there's something like you want to have testosterone optimization, but you also want to put on a lot of muscle, right? Because unfortunately with the testosterone optimization protocol, you're not going to put on a whole lot of muscle. It's just strengthening your current muscle fibers, right? Again, when you look at powerlifters, which powerlifters do follow usually the same training protocol as someone who wants to increase their testosterone, which is 3 to 5 reps, they look kind of average. They look like average people. Powerlifters don't look a whole lot different. Bodybuilders look a whole lot different, right? So the way you'd incorporate something like testosterone optimization into bodybuilding is you want to start off your workouts with the heavier loads, and that would be the testosterone optimization. So at the beginning of your workouts, do something like 5 reps of, let's say, rows, and you want to do 3 sets of that. Then the next set would be your bodybuilding set, right? Because with testosterone optimization, you don't need a whole lot of rounds of workouts, right? So you only need like one set. Let's say you have not one set. You have 3 sets of barbell rows that are around 5 reps, so really, really heavy. That's going to optimize testosterone, and then after that, you can continue on with a bodybuilding workout where you'd start off with, let's say, 8 reps of dumbbell rows, and the next set would be reverse flies or pull-ups or something like that, like weighted pull-ups. So yeah, that's how you'd include testosterone optimization with bodybuilding. And then there's something like maybe even longevity in bodybuilding. If your goal is to live a long time, but you also want to be big and strong, of course, live a healthy, dynamic lifestyle. So after every meal, take a walk, make sure you sleep well, all the good stuff for longevity. And of course, if your goal is to put on muscle, you want to have the same things. You don't want to eat right before you go to bed and stuff like that. But the way you'd include something like that is, again, they don't complement each other, but there are ways around it. at least a little bit. So generally, if your goal is to live a long time, you don't want a whole lot of carbs, but if your goal is to put on a lot of muscle, then you do want a lot of carbs, right? And assuming you're willing to kind of split the two, you're not willing to go all in on one and let the other one kind of go to crap. That's why you wouldn't have two goals if that was the case. So what I recommend for someone in that scenario is have maybe not even any white rice. So in that case would be you just have animal-based and you include bodybuilding as well. So what that would do is you still get a little bit of carbs from the fruit and the honey. So you have, let's say, I don't know, an orange or an apple or something after your workout, and then you have some steak or protein shake, which I'm not a big proponent of, but you can definitely do that. But you don't want to have a ton of carbs, which, shoot up your energy levels and stuff like that, which don't support longevity. And then there's also the factor of, with bodybuilding, you're not usually getting a whole lot of those more small areas, as we discussed earlier, like when I was discussing why people get injured often. There's those little intricate muscles that are in between all the big ones. The way you'd incorporate longevity in bodybuilding in that way would be, after your bodybuilding workout, include some subtle protocols that increase the strength in those little areas. So again, resort back to Knees Over Toes guy. Look at some of his videos. He includes after every workout, have one set of dumbbell pullovers where you kind of just stretch out the muscles, and then you have a rotator cuff one, and then you have some leg ones where you just do a little bit of subtle stretching and increase the strength in those little areas, stuff like that. So that's how you include strengthening those little intricate muscles with your bodybuilding, which is something I do personally. After my workouts, I like to do the rotator cuff stuff, the dumbbell pullovers, and then I do a little bit of leg stretching, which strengthens those intricate muscles. So that's how you'd include those. Generally, there's 1,000 different combinations you can get depending on your goals. So based on the information I've given, I think it's safe to say some of you guys will be able to configure your own goals and figure out what you should do with those. Generally, it's up to you to determine which ones are more important to you, right? Say you want to, again, do bodybuilding and longevity, right? Whichever one's more important to you at the time is the one you want to put more force into, right? So say your goal is mostly to live a long time. You want to have pretty subtle, short workouts that increase muscle mass and have benefits on your hormones and everything. But you don't want them to have the last, let's say, an hour and a half, which is like when you start reaching the pointless level of exercise, right? But if you take bodybuilding really seriously and you want to put on as much muscle as possible, then an hour and a half can make a little bit more sense, right? It just depends on which one is more important to you. So just follow that. And again, whichever one's more important to you, take that more seriously and follow more rigorously. What I want to add is when it comes to incorporating multiple modalities in the same workout, typically you want to start the workout with whichever one requires the fastest twitch of muscle fiber. So you don't want to start the workout doing something that has like 15 reps unless your goal is purely whatever that is. But we're talking about let's say your goal is to have testosterone optimization and then bodybuilding that's the example I used earlier. You want to start the workout with whichever one has the most weight and the lowest amount of reps, right? If you've ever done heavy weightlifting before, you know that it's not something that really exhausts you. It's just a lot of force emitted at one time. Whereas something like, say, 20 reps of dumbbell press, after that, you're just like, holy crap, I'm tired. My chest is exhausted. I can't even move my arms, right? You don't want to start off with something that makes you extremely tired. You want to save that for, near the end or whatever, right? So start the one that requires the most amount of force for a short amount of time, that being the fastest muscle fiber, super heavy weight for a short amount of time, and then move on from there. So again, say 3 to 5 reps at first, then a little bit later in the workout, move it to 8 to 12, and then later move it to 12 to 15. An additional detail I'd like you guys to take note of is notice how in all of these protocols, they include fasting and working out, like particularly resistance training. Those two are so fundamental for each human to have. I think it's really asinine for anyone to ignore those. Whether you, let's say you do a lot of cardio and you eat very clean, you still aren't including weightlifting or fasting, which are two extremely fundamental things that humans have been doing for hundreds of thousands of years. Maybe cavemen weren't lifting weights, but they inevitably had a resistance training of some sort. So it's something everyone should be doing, and avoiding those is just asinine in my opinion. Thanks for watching today's episode. We hope you've learned something valuable. The Candid Podcast also offers personal training for up to 2 weeks free for a select number of viewers, so grab the offer while you can.